I'm a language enthusiast. I love everything about languages. I love learning words and expressions. I love learning grammar. I love learning about the history of a language, about the etymology of words, the culture, everything. I love that it's non-competitive, that nobody has to forget their languages so that you can learn yours, that we can all be winners at the same time. For me, languages are the perfect mixture of science and art. I'm not the only one who likes languages. Worldwide, there are over 1 billion language learners. With so many potential customers, it's no surprise that language learning is a huge market. There is no shortage of gamified apps that claim that using them for a few minutes a day is more effective than a proper course. And countless people will promise you the world if you buy the heavily reduced but still massively overpriced course in the next few hours. Sadly, most of these apps just aren't all that great. What also strikes me as odd is that all of these language learning programs seem to be designed primarily to make money. I understand that people need to make a living, but where are the passion projects? Why is it that every major language learning program is commercial, sometimes even run by people who know nothing about language learning and everything about marketing? Why are genuine passion projects so few and far between? Why is there no lichess for language learning? This is where the Langbook project starts. I wanted to create a sensible language learning website that is free and available to all. But let's just get one big misconception out of the way here. No language learning course can make you fluent. The only way to reach fluency is by being exposed to authentic and natural use of the language in a way that is comprehensible enough to infer the missing bits from context. But if you don't already have a certain basic understanding of a language, natural use of a language is quite simply not comprehensible. That's where a good language learning resource comes in. A good resource teaches you the building blocks of a language, the different sentence structures, the little words, the particles, prepositions, conjunctions, and everything you need to later learn the missing bits from context. An astonishing number of courses get this wrong. For example, many courses organize their content into units on different topics, like colors, food, occupations, telling the time, animals, and so on. You learn how to say cat and dog and frog and horse and ant and magpie and platypus and so on. It's mostly just a bunch of words that would have been easy to learn from context, and it doesn't give you any building blocks at all. Let me give you an example of how this works in practice. Take the sentence, mae gen I ddau gi gwyn. Suppose you've learned that my means is, gen means with, and I means I or me in this context. So mae gen I means is with me. You also know that this is how Welsh expresses I have, since there isn't a direct equivalent of the English to have. Also, you know that ddau is a number, though you've forgotten which one. The last two words are unknown to you, but you know that structure-wise, gi must be a noun and gwyn must be an adjective. So you understand the sentence as I have plus number plus noun plus adjective, or I have X amount of a certain object. That gives you something to work with. Now let's add some context. Imagine you saw this person saying, mae gen I ddau gi gwyn. We can deduce quite a lot here. Ddau must mean two, and gi can only refer to the dogs. Gwyn might be a little less obvious. It could mean cute or small, white, smart, etc. But we can certainly narrow it down. A few more examples and we'll have figured it out for sure. But what if instead you followed one of those courses with units? You may have drilled your numbers, animals and colors. So you know that ddau is two, ki is dog, and gwyn is white. And let's say that you have also picked up on Welsh mutations, so you're not thrown off by the different beginnings of some of these words. You now know that the second bit means two dog white, or in natural English, two white dogs. But what about the first bit? There is little to help you figure it out. Even if you somehow deduce that it must mean I have, you're still left wondering why Welsh uses 3 words to express an idea that English conveys with only 2. A good course should have taught you these things. Then you've got your time wasters, like pointless animations and gamification. I understand that many people have dreamt of combining games with language learning. It's a good idea, I suppose, but I just don't think that these two things mix. The gamification element, the clicking of buttons, leveling up, receiving and spending coins, contributes nothing to your learning. And from a learning perspective, it's just time wasted. At the same time, the language learning elements often prevent the gaming bits from being interesting. Often there's just no connection at all. Like you have to answer a vocabulary or declension question to deliver damage to an enemy. It's just not particularly entertaining. Another common mistake is that many courses use a dumbed down version of the language that simply doesn't reflect how people actually speak. They don't teach you the most natural way of saying things and pronounce everything extra slowly and clearly, whereas native speakers would normally mash everything together. On the surface, this may look like a good idea because it's easier to understand and it may be appropriate for complete beginners, but at the end of the day, you want to learn how people actually speak, and there's little point in learning an artificial version of the language first. Then there are the courses that get you to speak early. Now, speaking early doesn't have to be a bad thing in and by itself. There are lots of good courses that implement it, but you should be aware that dedicating time to output takes away time from input. You'll learn to use what you've learned much quicker, fair enough, but your understanding skills of the language would be worse than those of someone who concentrated on input only. Some of these courses risk making you memorize a script with a few variables, but outside of this script you can't use the language at all. If you're anything like me, you'll want to be able to understand the language first before you try to produce it yourself. So how do we go about learning the building blocks of a language? There isn't just one right way, but I think the easiest and most straightforward approach is to show the learner full, authentic sentences in the target language with the translation and audio. This is precisely what Glossika does. They give you a sentence and its translation, then move on to the next sentence. That's all there is to it. It's a very simple method, too simple for some, but I think it's one of the best. It just cuts out all the nonsense. There is no time wasted with gamification, the clicking of buttons, useless quizzes, and the drilling of obscure vocabulary. There are, however, some issues with Glossika, which I tried to improve on with Langbook. Number 1. Not good for beginners. A lot of people criticize Glossika for being not very beginner-friendly. Indeed, if you don't already have a solid base in the language or already speak a similar one, there is very little to help you piece things together, and there is no grammar at all on Glossika.
I'm not sure.
Fulangtang.
Langbook, on the other hand, shows every word in a specific color to help the learner understand how the sentence is constructed and what's what. I've also tried to implement grammar bites, which are short videos of about a minute or two that explain certain grammar concepts. They are not currently implemented into the website, but rather just shorts I uploaded to YouTube, basically as a bit of a suggestion as to how the grammar part of Langbook could look like. I've also added a link to the dictionary and the comment section to make it easier for learners to understand what's going on in the sentences they're learning. But I have to admit that the comment section is pretty shit at the moment. Number 2. No dialects. Glossika doesn't really teach any dialects. In fact, pretty much nobody does. And I don't really know why. I think dialects are at least as interesting as languages. I don't only want to learn the standardized version of a language. I want to learn how people from different regions speak. But dialects receive almost no attention in the language learning world. And neither do the vast majority of languages. Most resources only ever concentrate on Spanish, German, and French, maybe stretching it to Swedish, Polish, or Swahili. A handful of resources offer things like Basque, Corsican, Wolof, Zulu, etc. But what about Udmurt, Shona, Gilbertese, Ta, or Satherland version? With Langbook, anyone can contribute language learning material in their native language and/or dialect through the incubator. Number 3. Quality versus quantity. There seems to exist a dilemma in that language learning resources have to decide whether they're going to concentrate on quality or quantity. The best resources out there only ever offer one language, which they carefully handcraft. Those that offer several dozen seem to have resigned themselves to using a one-size-fits-all approach that usually results in courses of very low quality. Glossika has done a better job than most other courses in that regard, but it still suffers from the same problems. The issue is basically that Glossika uses a bunch of stock sentences and translates them into the languages they teach. But every language is unique. If you translate everything from English, you miss out on a lot of the subtleties of the language. For example, you could translate the English sentence "I'm hungry" with "Ich bin hungrig" in German. That's perfectly good German. But much more common is "Ich habe Hunger," which translates back to English as "I have hunger," which sounds very odd indeed. If you only ever translate from English into your target language, you won't always capture the most authentic sentences. Another issue is that some words are more important in one language than in another. Scottish Gaelic, for instance, is mainly spoken in the Western Isles of Scotland, and as such, ferries are super important for Gaelic communities. And there are always issues with them. There's something about ferries on Gaelic news pretty much every day, and as such, the word ferry, ashig, is much more important in Gaelic than in most other languages. You completely miss this if you only translate into the language you're teaching. The same can be said about many collocations and idioms. With Langbook, I tried to fix this by letting contributors write sentences in the target language and then translating them into whatever the course is being taught from. Contributors have complete freedom, except for that they can't introduce more than 2 new words per sentence so as to not overwhelm the learner. Number 4. Glossika isn't free. I understand that language learning sites must make money to survive, but as soon as profits become the main focus, the problems start. Small languages rarely pay off making courses for, and so all we get is yet another Spanish course and yet another German course. And then you also have these ugly things like limited time offers, massive reductions on insane prices, cherry-pick reviews, empty promises, all using the same template. I would like to see at least one non-profit website, and it doesn't have to be Langbook or even the Langbook method, but just one non-profit website that offers unlimited access to sensible language learning materials in as many languages and dialects as users are willing and able to contribute. But the sad reality is that Langbook failed. There are just no users. Only 74 people have registered accounts on the website in the 16 months the website existed, and most of them are me anyway. Nobody seems to be using the website, and this channel isn't exactly being overrun either. Very little content has been contributed to the website. It's not super expensive to run the website, but it is money wasted, and I just don't see any reason to expect the project to suddenly magically take off. Why did Langbook fail? The short answer is, I don't know, but I can speculate. I think the quality certainly played a role. I know that there are lots of things that can be improved, but a bigger factor is probably the lack of marketing. When I started the project, I was naive enough to believe that success would come automatically if the product was good enough. I believe I was wrong about that. But I will never pay anyone to market my shit, because I believe it's a form of corruption, and I have no part in it. But the fact of the matter is that Langbook probably couldn't have succeeded without marketing. Because I'm not willing to do any marketing, I have to end the project here. Of course I am disappointed about the failure of the project, but I think I also learned a lot about languages, dialects, marketing, big projects, and about myself, as cliché as that may sound. Though I have sometimes thought about what would have happened if I had spent the same amount of money and time on one of those courses with a flashy countdown and a huge discount and cherry-picked off fake reviews, and then run a bunch of Facebook ads. But I wouldn't have been able to sleep at night. I will be taking the website down in the next couple of weeks, so you will no longer be able to use it. This channel is going to stay up, and so what little content was available on the website can be found here, but there won't be any new content added. However, I will end this video on a positive note. Even though the website will be taken down, the code will still be available for everyone for free. I still believe in an open source, non-commercial language learning website, and I want to contribute in whatever way I can. Anyone wishing to take on the project, or copy bits of it for their own project, can do so under 2 conditions. Number 1, the website must always remain free. Not freemium, no extras for people who donate, everything has to be free. Number 2, you cannot engage in paid advertising. This means you can neither sell advertising space on the website, nor pay to have adverts for the project shown elsewhere. Also no loopholes. This is supposed to be a community project and must never become for profit. As long as you stick to these rules, you can do with the code as you please. Knock yourself out. Everything I created is free to use without any need for attribution. You can make as many changes to the code as you see fit. The only thing you have to be careful with are the 2 buttons on the landing page, as I don't own the rights for them. You can either use them with attribution, as I did, or make your own images. Probably just make your own images. I'm sure you can do a better job anyway. I'll be putting the following in the description: a link to the code for the backend, front-end, and admin panel, a document listing known bugs and suggestions for improvements. You're not bound by this. contact details for the programmers who wrote the code, licensing information for the 2 images on the landing page. And that's it. Arrivederci.